My fellow bassists, welcome back. Alright, I've got to say, I see a lot of terrible advice for musicians on social media nowadays.
I have some information for you.
And some of these myths about learning music can lead to bad habits and beliefs about music that can literally slow down your progress by years. And no, this is not just a problem on social media. I've heard all kinds of advice from teachers in the past who I looked up to that later I realized was flawed or even just completely false. So today I'm going to go through 10 common myths about learning music and give you what I believe to be the more accurate advice. Myth number 1, practicing technique ruins your feel. This one is not only wrong, it's actually the opposite of the truth. Having efficient and effortless technique is actually the foundation of your musicality. It allows you to forget about what your hands are doing and focus entirely on the other elements of music. Timing, articulation, dynamics, and more. And it's these other elements that combine into what we call feel, and so actually practicing your technique to the point where it becomes automatic allows you to play with feeling. Now, of course, if you only practice technique and never actually try playing songs, then you might never develop good feel. So the key is to practice technique and also practice using that technique musically. Myth number 2, you have to practice 12 hours per day if you want to become a great bassist.
It has to be a Guinness World Record, right?
This is a trap I fell into a little bit. I never actually practiced 12 hours per day, but I definitely believed at one point that whoever practices the most number of hours becomes the best musician.
It's completely ridiculous.
What's actually far more important is the quality of your practice. Bass Grandmaster Michael Manring told me that he used to actually practice 12 hours per day, and now he's cut it down to just 2 or 3, and he's actually making more progress like this. And that's because he's so incredibly focused for those 2 or 3 hours that his brain and hands really solidify and crystallize everything they've learned much more effectively, which brings me on nicely to the next myth. Myth number 3, practice makes perfect. Okay, this one is not completely wrong, of course, but I much prefer the amendment, practice makes permanent. You can practice 12 hours per day and actually make no progress or even harm your playing. How is that possible? Well, for the last 6 hours of your session, you might be so exhausted that you start to play with sloppy technique, your mind starts to wander. And so what you're actually doing with your practice session is just solidifying sloppy playing and mindless practice, which inevitably means that when you go and do a live performance or even just jam with your friends, you're going to have bad technique and your mind is going to be all over the place. And that's because practice only makes perfect if you're practicing intentionally and mindfully and effectively. In other words, practice makes permanent. And if you want to know exactly how to build the perfect practice routine for you, then check out this video. Myth number 4, just learn how to be a regular bassist. Don't bother with learning solos. The thinking behind this one is that 99% of the time in popular music, the bass is just playing the bass line and accompanying the rest of the band. And let me be absolutely clear, there's nothing wrong with playing regular bass lines in a band, and I actually think that this is a skill that every bassist should have. But learning to play bass solos and techniques like slap and tapping doesn't hinder your ability to play regular bass lines. And in fact, in today's music world, anything that helps you stand out is a big bonus. The key is to just always be listening to the music and making sure you're adding whatever the song needs, whether that's just a regular bass line or a crazy slap bass solo. Myth number 5, just find your own voice. Don't copy others. This one definitely affected me in the early years. I felt like I really had to be so original and do something that no one's ever done before I even really had any experience or musical vocabulary to work with. The thing is, music is a language, and you can't learn any language by just sitting alone in your room and trying to come up with really original sounds. Huh? I started making progress much more quickly when I just started transcribing solos from my favorite bassists like Victor Wooten, Marcus Miller, and Jaco Pastorius. Of course, the end goal is to combine all of these influences and add your own spin on it, and you also really do have to make sure that you credit artists if you cover them and upload it online. But overall, don't be afraid to take inspiration and influence from artists that you admire. Myth number 6, music theory ruins creativity. This is another one that's so inaccurate, it's actually the opposite of the truth. People who say this are usually the same people who are using the same chord progression over and over again in the exact same key. Learning music theory actually gives you new options for your compositions. If you're in a creative rut, a great way to get out of it is to just try writing a new bass line or song in a different mode or time signature than you've ever used before.
I'm sorry. You're right. I am just a little depressed. That's all. I can get through this.
The key is just to use your music theory knowledge in creative and interesting ways rather than just making a song that sounds like a series of musical exercises. And if you need to brush up on your music theory or even learn from scratch, you can do that with my Playing with Music Theory course, which is free for all members of my Patreon. This takes you from the absolute basics like learning the notes on the fretboard all the way through to more advanced concepts like diminished licks and chromatic approaches. Just tap the link in the description to find out more, and I'll see you inside. Myth number 7, you can't teach feel. Okay, I get why people say this. I can't tell you how to play with good feel if you've never listened deeply to a great musician. But I can teach you how to play with good technique, good timing, expressive articulation, dramatic dynamics. And once you're proficient at all these different areas of music, all that's left to do is just to listen to some great musicians and see how they combine everything into what we call good feel. Myth number 8, the best way to learn how to play a fast song is to learn it very slowly and then just gradually increase the tempo. Some of you have already heard me talk about this, but it's worth repeating. You can't learn to run by just walking a little bit faster every day. At some point, you just have to try running. And the same is true for playing fast bass lines. Playing fast uses completely different muscles and feels very different from playing slowly. So while the traditional method of starting slow and then gradually increasing the tempo does work for the initial stages, once you reach a certain BPM, you do just have to try out some other techniques like speed burst exercises and the pendulum method. Check out this video if you want more details on how to play fast. Myth number 9, tone is all in the fingers. Okay, so the way that a bassist attacks the strings and where they choose to put their plucking hand and how they mute the strings with their left hand, these do affect the tone. But when I see people say that tone is all in the fingers, to me it always sounds like what they're saying is that your amp, your instrument, and your effects, none of that matters.
Well, the basic difference is that most bass players sound like this, whereas I sound quite different.
Those things have a huge impact on your sound, and they're also the quickest way to improve your sound. If you're not happy with how your playing sounds, then it could be your technique, but it could also just be that you don't have a great bass or amp. If you have some spare cash, I would recommend just trying out some different amps, basses, and effects, because it could be an instant fix for your tone. Okay, and lastly, myth number 10, it's impossible to make a living as a musician in 2026. I constantly hear people talking about how streaming services have just killed the music industry and it's impossible to make a living now as a musician. Of course, it's not easy, and if you're thinking of becoming a musician because you want to be rich and famous, then I would highly recommend choosing a different career path, because there's definitely easier ways to become rich, at least. It's true that not a lot of artists make good money from streaming, but social media has made it possible to distribute your music and your brand in general at an insanely low cost, or even free in a lot of cases. This means that you can still make good money from things like merch and sponsorships and selling tickets to live shows. And you also don't have to rely on a record label anymore, which means that you get to keep much more of your profit than you used to. And you also don't have to rack up tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So yes, the music industry has completely changed, and who knows what's going to happen with AI, but I honestly don't know if so far it's been a net positive or negative for the artists themselves. I just know that we're in a very different world now than we used to be, and I'm just trying to make the most of the world that we're currently in. So there you go, those are 10 of the biggest myths that I've seen in the world of music education. Let me know in the comments if you've been affected by anything in this video or any other bad advice. And remember, if you want to learn music theory and also join a community of over 16,000 fellow bassists, just tap the link below and you'll get instant access to my whole library of lessons, tabs, and exercises, and I'll see you inside. Thanks so much for watching, have fun practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.